What's up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of the Just Tube podcast. My name, as always, is Krishna Reddy, your trusty host, and we're back from a little bit of a break. We're getting back on that 2 week episode every about 2 week release schedule. Sorry, but this is a free podcast. I got a life. Sometimes I'm going to fall off the wagon, but we're going to do the best we can to get back on it. Introduction to this episode. So when I started this podcast, I might have mentioned this a few episodes ago, but basically the idea was we didn't want to have scientists when possible, just to keep it more colloquial, free-flowing, fun, and interesting. So generally we wanted to have more entertaining folks, like comics and actors and whatnot. But I always went into this with the idea that we'd have certain exceptions. One, with scientists that are in the public space, so they know how to talk and be engaging and interesting, and also scientists that are experts on things that I am not an expert on, which is a lot. And so these next actually 2 episodes are going to be examples of both of those ideals. So I'm having on Dr. Stephanie Buttermore. So we both did our PhD together in medical sciences. And what she did is after she got her PhD, she said, I'm done with working in a lab, sick of being a poor scientist. I'm going to go into the fitness space. So she got into the fitness space, and now she makes really great YouTube videos where she fitness-focused YouTube videos, but also still much more focused on the science than I think probably most YouTube fitness channels would be. So really cool. We had 2 really great interviews. So there's going to be the next 2 episodes. And so when I started this, talking to her about potentially coming on, we wanted to bring it back to basics because her channel is, I think it's great and interesting for everybody, but her audience is much more really hyper-focused on fitness. But what she noted is that a lot of people, even people who are super involved in fitness, forget the basics. And so who better to bring it back to basics than this guy? Because I don't know anything about how to the diet of exercise, the science of diet and exercise and whatnot. Believe it or not, right? Anyways, so the next 2 episodes are the first one, part 1, which you're about to hear, is on diet, the science of diet, and the next one is going to be on the science of exercise, and this is all for dummies. If you've never stepped foot in the gym before, if you eat McDonald's all your life, this is perfect for you. So definitely follow Steph on YouTube and Instagram, and she's also going to have these clips on her pages. So comment them, tell her that you were there tell her you're sent there from me. And without further ado, let's get into it. All right, we're live. So welcome to a new episode of the Just Tube podcast. With me today, I have a very good friend with me, fitness expert extraordinaire, scientist, Dr. Stephanie Buttermore. What's up, Stephanie?
Oh, not much. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. So I wanted to, before we actually got into it, I wanted to have a little nostalgia just to like set the stage at how I know you. So we were in the same PhD program. Shout out to USF and
Go Bulls.
Go Bulls. What is it? It's the little you got to do this. Is that? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and then so you started the program a few years before me, and then I think I first knew you as the the P girl because you would your project was on detection of ovarian cancer.
Oh, the pee girl, like as in urine girl. Yeah, I know. I was elbows deep in urine for like a year
That was
of
a
my
strange time in your
PhD.
life.
Yeah. That
Because
was
well, so you would always go around. Well, not always, but you for a while you were going around asking people for their urine
for
because
their sample.
well,
I
and it's
needed
because
normals.
because you were looking at biomarkers of ovarian cancer, which is it's a really cool project, but at the same time you're going around and collecting pee.
I
So
know
it's
you gotta do what you gotta do.
and
You
I was
did
always
it
kind of hurt
right.
because you never asked me for my piece. So I was like,
Oh, that's how you know that if we were real friends, I would ask you
yeah,
first.
that's what I'm saying. I was like, are we not? And then of course we got to know each other, and I think it was always cool because you were one of the few people who were doing something outside of science, like still doing the science thing, and I would say objectively better than a lot, if not most. But also you had this burgeoning fitness career going on.
Hmm.
And so how did that go? You before you started the PhD program, didn't you do like fitness competitions and stuff like that?
I did. So, like all through, I was an athlete growing up, and then throughout my undergraduate, I got into lifting, and then I started on the master's program. And as I was still, while I was carrying out my master's degree, I actually competed in a fitness competition as a physique athlete. I did the bikini division. If the
Are there other
listeners
divisions?
watching. Yep, yep. So for women, I'm in the smallest. If the listeners are watching via the video, they'll see that I'm not like a big person, but in the
Well, you
bikini.
must have like ox-like legs. You could have like just the
Yeah,
biggest
you
legs
never know.
and
You
just like
have
a
no
tiny
idea.
torso. I don't know.
Exactly, exactly. But I competed in the smallest division, which is the bikini division, and there's also figure, physique, and there used to be female and women's bodybuilding, but I think they actually took it away. So I think as of right now, it's just the top tier is physique athletes, and then in men it goes down all the way up to bodybuilding. But yeah, so I competed in an NPC bikini show and I won and won first and overall, and then
Okay.
I actually never competed again, just simply because it's not that easy. And I started the PhD program. So after I completed my master's, then I started doing my PhD, where it became very difficult to not only just like sleep and live, but
Yeah.
also get in like a very stringent like workout regimen and diet and all that stuff.
Well, and
So
also straight up, it didn't like what when because I know we've talked about this before, and it just didn't sound that fun.
it's not
I
the
mean,
the
I'm sure
funnest.
it's what for me it sounds like climbing a mountain because like
Yeah,
I've done that before, and like every part of that sucked except the when you get to the top,
exactly.
and
It's
then but
exactly what it is.
yeah, and then it's just like okay, that moment was great, but I know what that moment feels like, so
Yeah, I really did feel like I got that bug out of my system. There are some people who love it and they continue to compete, and they compete in like 6 shows a year, and they are going for, like this can be a profession for a lot of people. So as you compete as an amateur, if you do very well and win a national level show, you can get your pro card. So there is some sort of like aspiring amateurs that want to become professionals. So
I
that
see.
takes like a lot
And
of
that's and
competing
that's
and
just like getting
experience.
sponsorships and stuff like that, or
No, you actually just become like getting like turning into a professional athlete. Like
oh
if you
okay,
were to, yeah. And so like, getting a pro card, you're now professional like physique athlete. But you don't have to be a pro to have sponsorships or anything like that. That just comes with your reach and with social media, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But
yeah,
with social media and sponsorships and things like that, that's where that comes into play. How much money you can make the company. If you happen to be a pro and you have a big name, that also can help you, but it's not necessary.
yeah, okay.
Mhm.
So then you did that during your masters and then started the
Mhm.
PhD, and you're still kind of doing this stuff, I guess, in terms of
Mhm.
fitness, but on an amateur level, I guess you'd call that.
Yeah, I would say I would consider myself an intermediate lifter. Like I'm not a beginner by any means. I've been lifting now for like 5 or 6 years, but at the time I, have acquired a little bit of muscle mass, and I was still continuing to just work out and stuff like that. I had no aspirations of continuing to do any more physique competitions. I just liked to work out. I enjoy fitness, and I don't think that it's like competing is a requirement to want to improve your physique. You don't have to put it on display on a stage just because you want to look better. Everyone wants to look and feel good. So
That had a little sass there. I like that.
yes.
Yeah, you felt good. You felt strongly about that.
I do feel very strongly about that. So yeah, I just had a really strong passion for it, and continued to love and work out throughout my PhD. I usually always prioritized it and made time for it. Whereas it's not always easy when you're doing a PhD to do that, but I did make the time and made it happen, and was kind of more or less using fitness as like another avenue of, it wasn't more or less a hobby, but I don't know. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do when I finished my PhD, and fitness always seemed like a viable option if, this whole, cancer research thing didn't work out. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, due to the state of, and they kind of, you, as you know, doing your PhD, throughout the entire process, you are very aware of like your rates of success after. And some people are very successful and go on to do amazing research and continue on and become professors and get tenure and all of those things, and publish in high impact journals, like living the dream. But a lot of people don't always get that opportunity. They will work in a very competitive environment with doing their postdoc, and getting actually hired as a professor is very
Well,
difficult.
and I think you might have actually talked about this in one of your videos, but it's like the at least the track that they sell to us, the dream that they sell us in the PhD, it's like the percentage of people who make it in the academic track is like so low.
It's incredibly
And
low.
so now there
So,
are like alternative careers and stuff like that,
hmm,
but
I
not.
meant very alternative.
Yeah, you did.
So for your listeners who don't know, I actually, now that I've finished my PhD,
Yes.
I have a YouTube channel where I share my fitness
A
journey and
very
my love.
popular YouTube channel,
Yeah, I
I
have a
might
popular
add.
YouTube channel. Thank you very much. It's quite new. It's actually my 1 year anniversary now on YouTube.
Oh,
I know. I put up my first YouTube video.
somebody get you a cake?
I deserve one.
Yeah, I'll send you a
uh,
cake.
yeah. Oh, thank you. But yeah, so it's been about a year now, and it's been an interesting journey. I grew very successfully on YouTube, and I'm just overwhelmingly grateful for all of it. I feel like my subscribers I have mostly women
I was
followers,
about to
so
say, so if you could summarize your YouTube channel in like a
yeah.
sentence or two, how would you
Okay.
do it? Like what if I wanted to if I was in an elevator and I had to sell somebody on
Yeah.
your YouTube channel? It wouldn't be that hard, but what would I have to say to them?
If you want to grow your glutes
Okay.
and watch a girl eat a lot of food and learn the science behind fitness, you should watch my channel.
You had me at glutes.
Yeah, that's all that I need to do.
You know how to sell to a market. I'll give you that.
Yeah, you gotta cater to the audience. That's what I'm saying. You gotta work the YouTube algorithm. It's all part of the game. It's like playing the game.
You're like, what do nerds want to see? And then you just go from there.
Yep,
Nerds want
exactly.
to see butts.
You gotta mix enough science into, like, you gotta seep in the science somehow. You gotta draw them in with something. So in our world we call it clickbait, but you gotta draw them in. But if the content is good and you drew them in, it's I take a very utilitarian approach on it. It's justified. Exactly.
Yeah, a means to an end. You're very would it be Machiavelli or something? I don't know. It's been a while since I've read that stuff. All right, so let's. So we're gonna talk about two things,
Mhm.
and so for basically, and so the reason I brought up these two things because I think people say, okay, if you want to be healthy, the two things that are irreplaceable are diet and exercise, right?
Right.
And that's what we're going to talk about. But first, I figured it's always good to establish why. So why do people want to get healthy, at least in your experience? Like, okay, so like for example, me, I want to get healthy so I can not have to buy bigger t-shirts and
Mm.
and not die.
Right.
But so
Yeah.
like so my point is that different people have different goals. So it's like
Right.
if like you don't have a reason to work 7 days in the gym, then you're not gonna.
Right.
So you got to like scale your goals. You know what I mean?
hmm Yeah, depending on your goals will dictate how, I guess, more how committed you have to be to actually training and diet. So, if you are trying to improve your body composition, meaning if you want to improve how much lean body mass versus fat mass you have, it requires you to lose fat mass and to increase your lean body mass. And you do that by dieting. Dieting predominantly takes place for losing fat mass, and like diet is most of it, but
Mm.
improving obviously your muscle, like muscle hypertrophy development, that requires resistance training. So
Okay.
if you want to, aesthetic purposes only, look better, that is a good reason in itself. But however, if you do not care the way that you look, for many health reasons, resistance training can help you. Obviously, diet and not accruing too much fat mass can prevent all sorts of chronic diseases like diabetes, heart, cardiovascular diseases, probably cancer. But improving like your lean body mass and how much muscle that you have, resistance training is really good not only for improving bone density, preventing sarcopenia, muscle atrophy as you age, and it just overall improves how you feel, how you sleep, and all of those things. So if you just want to improve your overall health without really caring too much about the aesthetic purposes, then it's still a good reason to put in like at least a somewhat regular fitness routine, and obviously making sure that you just don't eat junk all the time. So
So so so in other words, if you're talking about just feeling better, then that
right.
leans more towards the exercise side of things.
No,
No, not
because if you
necessarily.
eat
Okay.
like shit, or I don't, can I curse on this? I don't know.
Yeah, we're
If
gonna.
you eat,
I'll bleep it. Worst
okay,
case. No, we. Yeah, of course you can.
okay.
Yeah.
If you eat like shit, you're not gonna feel good.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you have a poor diet, it will affect how you feel. So obviously, exercising makes you feel good too, but your diet does play a large role in that as well.
Actually, that's an interesting point. That I've talked to people where like they it seems like they get like a high off of running. Where
Mm-hmm.
I'm like the type of person I'm just like make it stop.
Yeah.
And like I actively do it too, but it's not like it just never feels good. So it's like, have you
I
noticed
feel-
that? Like, are different people just wired that like?
I think so. I think it releases like a certain level of endorphins or dopamine or something like that. For some people,
Some sciencey shit, yeah.
there might be some large like genetic component to that, because that has never happened to me. The day that I feel good after running will be a day that I do it again, but I don't
Yeah, you're
do.
not a big runner, huh?
No, I don't. I don't actually do a lot of cardiovascular or aerobic exercise.
Well, meaning directly. Obviously, you get a lot indirectly.
Yeah, and honestly, like there is a lot of research supporting something called high intensity interval training. I don't know if you've ever heard of
Yeah,
it.
I
It's
think I have.
HIIT. And in a way, resistance training can actually double as that. If you pace your sets and reps appropriately, you get a very good amount of aerobic exercise in there as well. And it depends on how sedentary I am. Is like if I spend most of my day sitting at a computer, I would like to incorporate, maybe I'll just do like a brisk walk that day or something like that. Like try to break up. I always try to get like, I've been committed to getting 10,000 steps a day. That's like as much cardio as that I do.
Yeah.
But if it's your goal to lose weight, cardio isn't the best way. That can be manipulated predominantly with diet. But if you want to like improve your cardiovascular health and respiratory health and all that stuff,
Okay.
aerobic exercise, aside from like whether or not you're like an endurance athlete, if you're just like a regular, common gym goer, then you don't, aerobic exercise can be kind of implemented and get the most bang for your buck with resistance training.
Okay. I've never
hmm
quite heard it broken down like that because yeah, in terms of losing weight being more of a diet thing.
Oh, it's like almost all diet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And like honestly, I'm sure like if like there was a gun to your head, you could like bust out a 10K if you had to. Like
If I had to,
like
yeah.
gun to your head, like
Oh, no, definitely. I would say that I am in relatively good
Yeah,
shape. I
exactly.
would
That's
like
what
to
I
think
mean. Is
that I am.
that's the thing. I
It's just
don't
I
want
don't
people to get the
enjoy
wrong
it.
idea
No, no, absolutely
that
not.
like
I know I think that I could, and I think that I would be more cardiovascularly fit than the next person.
that's what I'm saying. Is I don't
Yeah,
want people to think that like you have like this just awful heart and just like
no,
yeah, yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah.
not. But that also has to do with like improving, like losing fat mass in itself, or having a lower body fat percentage, like a healthy body fat percentage in itself is good for your heart, regardless of the amount of aerobic exercise that you do. So,
All right, that's a good
so
transition. So we could talk about different types of food.
mhm.
We were talking about this outline earlier. So all right, let's talk about the main types of food that you get in your diet, and what they do. So proteins, carbohydrates, and fat. Would
Right,
that
right,
be the
right.
three main umbrellas?
Yep, yep. And in the world of nutrition, I guess they would just refer to them as the macronutrient
Yeah,
composition.
I was reading a lot about macros, and I was like,
Macros,
I was thinking like
yes.
Excel. I was like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? I don't know.
There's just macros because you consume them in large quantities as opposed to micronutrients, which is like vitamins, and
Okay.
minerals, which are you consume in very small quantities. So macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, which I take a very balanced approach to a diet. I am not a trained dietitian or nutritionist. However, I have like experience with,
You
just
you 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 know how to eat. You
this
eat.
world. Yeah, I am in this world, and I know how to eat, and I know how to eat according to improve not only my physique and for appearance purposes, but also for performance purposes and for increasing strength and things like that. So I consider, like, I don't like to eliminate whole food groups. I feel like there's a lot of things that go around on social media and the internet that, eliminate fat or eliminate carbohydrates or
That's basically
eliminate.
all these diets, right? It's like
Yeah,
eliminate this, and that's the
yeah,
problem, and
yeah,
then just
yeah.
focus on these two, and
Yeah,
then
it's like there's every decade comes a new fad or a new, like, devil of food. And the thing about nutrition is that people get very, very emotionally attached to food, and people are also very passionate about it. So it's highly voiced on the internet, so you can get all these conflicting views all over the place, and there's always a new diet. There's paleo, keto, and all sorts of things. So how to, like, kind of separate yourself from that if you have no digestive issues with any of these things, you don't have celiac or you're not lactose intolerant, I would suggest just approaching a very balanced way of eating food. So there is a lot of evidence supporting that a high protein diet, in terms of body composition and fat mass, it actually improves lean body mass and actually decreases fat mass. So having a good amount of protein, because a lot of people are afraid of eating protein in the general population, maybe not in physique athletes, but in the general population, a lot of people are afraid of protein. But you should have.
so why do you think they're afraid of protein? You think that people think they're gonna eat a steak and get like just get like huge muscles? Like why? What's the fear based on?
I know, I think that people are afraid of eating too much protein because they think that it's bad for their kidneys, or they think that it's bad for digestion. Or, and then there's also now a
Well, I
lot of.
avoid the red meats because I'm like, 'cause I got high cholesterol in my family.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally fine, but you can get a lot of lean protein sources would be like chicken, egg whites, even whey protein. It's good to, especially if you're incorporating a resistance training program, it's probably a good idea that you're getting sufficient protein. And there are general recommendations of how much you should have, but I think a really good rule of thumb to be a little bit more on what some people would consider the high end, probably in the physique world would be like moderate, but 1 gram of protein per pound, so for body weight. So if I
That's per day.
per day.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So if I'm 125 pounds, say, I would eat about
Is that how
120.
much you weigh right now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. You said like a hypothetical. I was like, I gotta know.
Oh, no, no, no. That's how much I weigh. Uh, I am 5'4" and 125 pounds of
I'm about to
fat.
say you're about to give me all the information. Give me your social and your.
Yeah, exactly. just to give you guys an idea. And so yeah, that would be my general recommendation for protein. For carbs and fat, I would recommend fats. People are afraid of eating fat, but there's obviously a good fats to have, and it should probably make up probably 20 to 30% of your
All right,
diet.
so let's before we get into that, so let's talk about the difference between protein, carbs, and fat in terms of what they're
Okay.
doing on the body.
Oh, sure, sure.
So,
Okay.
so proteins are, I guess, are more for muscle mass and growth. That would
Not
be,
only for that, obviously protein is important for
yeah.
whole body
All these are going to
cellular
be
function.
overlapping, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. But protein is obviously it is very important for muscle protein synthesis. You need those amino acids to rebuild new muscle. That is the point of hypertrophy. But also just for like normal cellular function, you know that we need all sorts of proteins and amino acids
All
to
these
be
things.
doing
Yeah.
all of those things. And then for carbohydrate, carbohydrate obviously supplies your body with fuel and energy, which when you consume carbohydrates, glucose enters your blood system, and then you get a release of insulin, and then that is drawn in. Then that draws in glucose to the cells and delivers it to where it needs to go. Obviously, glucose is the main fuel for your brain, and also drives the cellular function because it's converted into ATP, and that's what your cells need to
That's
energy.
from that's energy, and that's from the powerhouse of the cell.
Yes,
Yeah.
from the mitochondria.
Yeah.
I learned something during my PhD.
Yeah. Right. We're
Um,
smart motherfuckers out here. We're really getting it.
yeah, yeah. So you need carbs for fuel, and something I think that a lot of people don't know, but carbs are very readily utilized. They're almost immediately utilized and for energy, and they're not as commonly used for storing fuel, or well, they're not commonly used for storing fat, say. So that's where fats come in. So fat is our storage for extra energy
You're trying to
for
like hunker
those.
down for the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, so but you need fat for a lot of functions in your body. So eliminating fat is not good. It can cause a lot of problems, especially in women. So you need certain levels of fat. You need to obtain a healthy body fat because you can run into all sorts of hormonal problems if you completely eliminate fat from your diet. And it can. There's also evidence that like having good fatty acids and fish oils and things like that can actually improve fat loss. So you need to have a good level of fat in your diet.
Well,
So
and
it's not a
I
bad.
think you touched on an important point earlier, which is that all these are necessary for cellular function. If you have a cell and you take out one of these things, your cell's gonna
Right.
die.
Right. It's very
So it's like,
be some dysfunction there. It's obviously you're not going to feel good either. And in terms of like your energy and things like that, it's not good. But yeah, a lot of people will, like I said, just they grab onto something being bad for you and then they just completely eliminate it.
well,
And
and
some,
it maybe it's I think it's just because we always want something like easy, meaning like, okay, all I need to do is cut out
yeah, it's like one
this
thing, right?
bad thing, and then
Mhm.
it's, you know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. So these are all like obviously very important, and you get them from the food that you eat. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence supporting that trans fat is bad. So if you're gonna avoid something, maybe avoid trans fat.
So trans
But
fat isn't like carbs that became fat. Like, never mind, that's a bad joke.
no,
Uh,
yeah.
no, so trans fat is like that's like when you eat like fried foods and stuff like that. That's like the
Mhm. So
so
what happens
where's the
if
main source of that?
well, so when food is modified in some way, it like undergoes like a change because it was processed and it makes trans fat. And there's just a
So
lot
there's
of
like a
evidence.
chemical change, so that there's
Yeah,
like some high
chemicals.
heat or whatever,
Mhm.
and it causes some
Exactly.
strange reactions. So okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so if you're gonna avoid anything, it's probably a good idea to avoid trans fat. But otherwise, there's evidence to support that saturated fat is not as bad for you as we used to think it was. But there's
That's why the
monosaturated
avocado
fat.
cake is happening right now, right?
The coconut oil,
Oh, coconut oil.
coconut oil saturated fat, and coconut oil does everything apparently. So,
My mom's
um,
been saying that, and like for ages, because she's just an Indian lady who just that they always have coconut oil around, and I just don't want to admit she's right.
Mm. Well, the reason why it was originally thought it was bad because your body can produce saturated fat on its own, but so it doesn't really need to have any dietary saturated fat.
Uh-huh.
But it's not as bad for you we once used to think it was.
All right, so
So that was
coconut
like the
oil,
air.
where else? Where else are we getting saturated fats from?
Saturated fats, coconut oil. I think that you get good healthy fats from avocados
Love
as
me
well,
some
like you
avocados.
mentioned.
Yeah.
But you get like good fats like from omega 3s and things like that from walnuts. You can get good fats from almonds, olive oil is a
Fish oil
monolith.
too, right?
Fish oil
Yeah.
is very good. It's probably a really good idea, and flaxseed. So it's a good idea to get those omega 3s with fish, walnuts, and flax seeds and things like that. So just a variety of oils, and
I've
so
been
it's
taking them
always.
omega 3, like the fish oil pills.
Yeah, that's if you don't get fatty fish like salmon multiple times a week, I would say that supplementing it is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
So I would do that. And another thing, like going back to carbs, people kind of ward off carbs, and there's a lot of low carb diets and things like that. But if you're gonna focus on
Isn't that ketogenic? Isn't that the low carb high fat?
Yeah, that is more of on the extreme end because it is very low carb, high fat, but it's low carb, very high fat.
Okay.
So your
But there's like
body,
intermediate versions of keto, right? Like
I
that
don't
people
know,
I don't know enough
I
about it.
don't know how you would be intermediate in keto because once your body transitions into ketosis, it's very easy to come out of it.
I see.
So once you're in it, which takes, I think that they think they say like fully like full blown keto, it takes like 2 weeks, and you undergo like something called the keto flu, which you feel very badly at the beginning because you've
Jesus
completely
Christ.
eliminated all of your carbohydrate, going down to almost like I know that they I think the average is like 30 grams of carbohydrate, and then they have something like 150 to 170 grams of fat, and then they have like moderate protein. And I'm not saying that it's a bad diet, and I would just say that do the diet that works for you, that you enjoy, and that you're going to adhere to. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the keto, but keto diet because there's a lot of people who are very successful with it
Yeah.
and feel very good, but they have a very very high fat diet, which
So it's
because
tough to for regular people to do probably.
I would imagine I've never personally tried it myself. It's just because a lot of sources of fat in our environment right now also have carbohydrates in it, like a lot of processed foods do. So when
Sure.
you're eating a lot of fat, what only has fat is just like very fatty meats and maybe even avocado, but avocado to a degree has carbohydrates in it, and maybe just straight oil, I guess. So it's not very easy to find just only fat food unless you're just, especially if you are a vegetarian, or yeah, so you get a lot of fat from meats and things like that. But where I was going with that is that when you switch over to ketosis, your body utilizes a different energy fuel sources and it runs off ketones at that point.
Right.
So I just don't know how easy it is to stay in ketosis if you're a moderate one, because as soon as you have enough carbohydrates, it will stimulate glucose as the fuel. So I don't know how that works exactly.
Yeah, I'm about to say I didn't even know that much about the
Oh yeah.
ketogenic diet. So you're saying words, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that was Keto 101, but of course there are probably people who know way more about it than I do, but that's from what I understand, that's how it works.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, and actually what always struck me about you is that like you sort of just seemed it didn't I mean not it didn't seem like you were going willy-nilly like eating everything that was in sight except for a couple notable days. But
I have quite the appetite, I have quite the
yeah,
capacity.
you make me feel like less of a man when I eat with you. It was like you would
I
just
can eat. I
you
can
throw
eat. I am not
down.
afraid of it. Yeah, I'm
But
not afraid of eating.
but it didn't seem it seemed like you were still eating what you wanted to eat.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
didn't seem like you ever really limiting yourself.
No, and I don't. I think that I incorporate a very, like I said, like balanced approach to nutrition, and I don't limit myself from what I want to eat. I'm currently bulking, so I usually like I think when you met me, I was like probably 10 pounds less than this, and I used to maintain that. But in the optimizing training like bodybuilding world, we do something called bulking where we'll be in a caloric surplus, and the intention of doing
Why you
this
gotta
is
use
to.
complicated words? You're just eating a
Oh,
lot, and you
sorry.
yeah no
Yeah,
no no.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not I'm not saying
Sorry.
I'm not
Minor
I'm not shitting on
scientist.
you or anything, but like caloric surplus, you're eating a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so commonly used
I
terminology
know. I'm
in
teasing
in
you.
this environment. But okay, so yeah, so I eat
I'm
more
kidding.
than what I eat a lot, and I try to put on weight because I'm trying to build some muscle.
Okay. Are you
Yeah.
just going for a certain aesthetic right now?
Yeah, so obviously, I think that it's the goal with anybody who resistance trains a lot or goes to the gym is to try to build some muscle, and your body has an easier time doing that when you eat more. So you kind of just have to accept that you are gonna gain a little bit of fat, but in hopes of gaining a lot of muscle,
Yeah.
because when you are dieting, uh, muscle can be used for fuel, and you can kind of lose some of your muscle. So to ward that off, again, going back to a higher protein diet is a good idea.
So is there for what you normally do on a day-to-day basis in terms of dieting, is there like a formal name for it? Is there like a guide on the doing what you do, which is that like okay, just balancing your macronutrients,
Hmm.
because I'm sure you have like certain calorie limits, uh, because based on like how much you're working out and stuff like that, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's also based on what your maintenance is. So, like, how many calories can you eat and like not gain any weight or lose any weight? So like whatever your maintenance is, you kind of dictate. You have to figure out what your maintenance is, based off like the general guidelines I gave, like 1 gram of protein per pound, and then the 20 to 30% of the rest of your calories as fat, and then probably like 50% of those total calories as carbs. You kind of like gauge from there. Say I maintain on 1,800 calories. So what do I have to do to manipulate those macronutrients if I want to gain or if I want to lose? So something has to give. Like it kind of can be as simple as that energy balance of you have to eat less and then move more.
So is that sort of a personal journey that you figure that out? Is everyone different with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's very individualized, and it just depends on what you want. And like if you want to just like maintain and make sure you're getting all of your micronutrients and all that kind of thing, and you want to build muscle, just making sure that you're eating a balance of everything is good. And there's a lot of like names of certain diets like in on the online community, but what's very popular for people and an easy way for people to have like treats and also eat healthy is the if it fits your macros camp. So that camp
If it
will just,
fits your macros. I'm trying to
yep,
think of what the abbreviation is.
the IIFYM crowd.
IIFYM. Okay.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that was that
so
would that be what you call yourself?
I would say so because I have like macronutrient guidelines, and I kind of fit more or less what I want to, whether that if it's a donut that day or if I just eat clean foods, quote unquote. There's
Mm.
nothing magical about clean foods, but healthier, more micronutrient dense foods. Then I can have the best of both worlds if they fit within these guidelines, or fit within this range of macronutrients, and I can have that with under the assumption that you're also getting enough fiber. You don't want to get all of your carbs from like refined foods.
Okay.
So high fibrous fruits and veggies. Make sure I have enough of those. You look like you have tons of those, Krishna.
Oh, now you're just ragging on me. Wait. So what the hell was I gonna ask? It was gonna be good too. So it seems like just using common sense seems to be the way. It's like
Yeah, it's so much simpler than everyone makes it seem. Like it really is simple, and it people latch on to, like you said, these things that are bad or good, or and they overcomplicate how simple it can be. So I think that it's more sustainable when you think of it that way, other than making it like incredibly complex, and I don't know.
Well, it just seems like you just shouldn't cheat yourself. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna avoid breads or avoid whatever in the hopes of,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like there's no shortcut.
Right. So, and they think it's like maybe they think it's like a magical diet or it's going to give them results faster, but in the reality of things, that the best diet is the one that you can stick to.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good sort of summary of of, of that.
Mhm.
All right. So now I think we about covered. We kind of bounced around, but in a good way.
Mm.
So all right. I think I had here. Okay. So we talked a lot about diet. So then, how do you pick your food? That always seems like especially nowadays, that's like controversial with like organic and stuff like that. Um,
Okay.
so like, do you, you're, so people, I think nowadays, so there's people get scared off by like ingredient names and
Mhm.
stuff like that. They're like, oh, it's long and complicated. I can't pronounce it, and
Mhm.
so therefore I can't eat it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, I could pronounce cyanide, doesn't mean I'm gonna eat that. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
so what do you? How do you when you walk into the grocery store? What's your approach?
Um, my approach is, well, first, whole foods are usually better. It's probably a good idea to have the majority of your diet made up with whole foods.
Whole Foods
However,
meaning like not the store, but
yeah, you buy
what do
the
you
whole
mean?
store. Like meat and dairy and grain sources that have not been processed or refined, or like that haven't been messed with too much. Like the least amount of messing with that, like the food the way that it came, is probably a good idea,
So
especially when it.
that does that necessarily equate to organic or
No, it actually does not. So organic is, as by like definition of the USDA, it just means that they can't have anything artificial incorporated or made into it, but doesn't mean that they haven't altered. Like when they make organic crackers, say they use like a certain wheat and they did process it, just like it is processed and it does have sodium and all that stuff, but it doesn't have anything, maybe like an artificial coloring or artificial flavoring or anything like that. And it also limits the amount of preservatives that it can be in it. And the farmers, when it comes to like the meat and dairy industry, and then, or not just meat and dairy, the produce, I think only have to follow like 70% guidelines for it to be considered organic. So there's 30% where they can, there's like wiggle room of 30%, but there's nothing special or better about anything that is organic. Also, it can't be genetically modified if it's organic, which like they make, they do things to fruits and veggies and things like that to whether they can resist certain like insects and things like that. That can't be considered organic, but it doesn't make it better and it doesn't make it magical for any means. And I don't personally stand too strongly behind eating organic just because I don't know if it's entirely better. And
yeah, I
doesn't
don't
mean
th-
that it's
you the
more
research really isn't out for
micronutrient.
that.
No, and it doesn't make it more micronutrient dense or anything like that. So if you are on a budget, by no means like do you have to be eating organic food. So I don't think that that is super important. And in terms of like the things that you said that you can't pronounce, and that is something that people will be like, oh, if I can't pronounce what's in it, I won't eat it. Well, a lot of these things that are added to foods are very regulated by the FDA. So they can only have like so much in certain quantities that were considered safe, and they probably have significantly less of it than is what even comes close to being dangerous. But they are like things like that are preservatives and artificial coloring and things like that.
Yeah.
That's usually have the funny names and stuff. And artificial sweeteners also have sometimes scary names to people. However, if you are so scared of those things and you're eating so much of those things that contain all of those things with bad names that you're afraid of reaching that upper limit, I think there's something more wrong with your diet than those chemicals, because you shouldn't be eating that much processed food.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but like to the point where you should be scared of eating too much of those things. That means you have to eat a lot. It probably has to encompass your entire diet that you would be scared of having those things, which I said whole foods are probably a good idea to have most of your diet whole foods, but I'm not by any means scared of, wheat thins that have preservatives in it.
Yeah, and plus they're delicious.
They're delicious.
Okay, so I think that was my major point, which is that you can eat well on a budget.
Oh, for
It's like you don't
sure.
have to be
Absolutely.
intimidated into like buying expensive shit just
No,
to okay.
it's all marketing. It's a conspiracy.
Well, I also get I get to be a bit of a devil's advocate here. I get mistrust of the government. You don't want to
Oh,
trust the
sure,
FDA.
sure.
But also like so the reason that these names are long and complicated and scary is that they're just chemical
They're
names
just chemical names.
of
Right, right,
of
right.
stuff. It's just a bunch of nerds who wanted to
Dihydrogen monoxide
yeah,
is just water.
yeah, it's a bunch of nerds who just wanted to just didn't like the street name that much or something, and then they needed a standardized way to call something what it
Hmm.
is, and it just has to be long and complicated because you're talking about chemical structures. Everything has a chemical structure.
Exactly, exactly. So it shouldn't be scary or anything.
Okay, okay. Um, are there any like go-to brands that you like in terms of food?
Um,
Just because it's like sometimes it's like okay if you buy like a pair of Nikes you know what they're you know how
you
those
know
are
how
gonna
good they
last.
are.
Yeah, you know how that those are gonna last. It's not they're not gonna fall apart in a week on you. Is there any like brands that you're like okay these guys I just if I see them I'll get them.
Not particularly. I will eat just as much generic packaged food as branded food. It doesn't really matter to me. Anything that is, like I said, like a whole food, like vegetables, don't really have
Yeah,
brands.
sure.
But
I can only think of
things
the one banana. The
Chiquita.
yeah the lady with the
Or
headdress. Yeah.
yeah. And Zespri makes kiwis. I know that.
Oh, you're a big
Um,
kiwi girl.
yeah, I love kiwis. Kiwis are very good for you.
Do people? I'm gonna sound super dumb when I ask this. Do you eat it with? You don't eat the skin, do you?
I do.
Do you really? Are
I
you?
do
Do people normally?
use it. I don't think so. I have always done it my whole life. Maybe it's because I have a foreign mom. Like that's what happens
Yeah, it's like you
when
don't waste any part of that damn kiwi.
nothing. Like my mom will eat the shell of a watermelon. Like
Oh, your mom's hardcore. I see where you get it from now.
I've never seen anyone do
Your
that. So
mom would eat nails if she could.
yeah,
Jesus H.
that's what happens when you have an Asian mother. But you waste nothing and you eat everything of everything. So I always grew up eating it. And I actually kind of like it. It's a little bit sour, so the skin of a kiwi is a bit sour. So, but
Okay.
most people don't like it because of
Do you eat it raw or do you like put it in a blender with like some shit?
Oh no, I just eat it like an apple kind of thing.
Okay. Oh, okay. My
Yeah.
mom used to tell me with watermelon, she used to say like if you eat the seeds, a watermelon tree is gonna grow out of your stomach.
Yeah, I know. I think that was a Rugrats thing where
Might have been.
like in Rugrats they ate like the seeds of a watermelon. They grew a watermelon in their belly.
Well, I had a slightly more horrific take on it because I thought the tree was gonna like come out of like my mouth and I was just gonna die this horrible death.
A
And,
watermelon tree or just a tree? Because watermelons don't grow
oh
on
yeah, they
trees.
don't grow. You know what I mean? A vine. Jesus H. A vine. Not a botanist. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I guess maybe as a kid, maybe I didn't realize that watermelons did grow. So maybe my fears were unfounded. But yeah, I always just thought this horrible, violent death of just shit ripping through my and it never happened.
Okay, that's good to know.
All right, so that was
I've always avoided watermelon seeds in the event that happens. So now I
yeah,
know that
'cause
it
like
didn't happen to you, so I'm okay.
no,
I'll
but
eat them.
that's n equals one. We're scientists. You got to ask more
Yes.
people. You know that. Uh,
Exactly.
all right. On the food kick, or I guess not last because I feel like this might actually be a good discussion here. But all right, so let's talk supplements. So you
Okay.
talked a little bit about micronutrients.
Hmm.
So the vitamins for you, do you just take a daily vitamin and just not think about it all that much?
Yeah, so I obviously try to get as many micronutrients in my diet as possible.
So
That's
all right,
obviously
let's
not that
explain.
easy.
Let's lay down the groundwork why taking like a vitamin or micronutrients are necessary. So my impression is just basically there are just certain molecules that your body needs that you just cannot get in sufficient quantities from food.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there.
All right,
That's why I
bam.
think that multivitamins are generally pretty inexpensive. There's no harm in taking them. There's no like deleterious effects of having covering your basis for everything because your diet can't be that great that you're getting as much as you need of everything all the time. And I know that a lot of people think that vitamins are a waste of money and things like that, but
Do they really?
of all the things you spend your money on, yeah, there's two camps that people don't think they're necessary, and some people think that they don't do any harm, so why not? And I fall into the latter camp. But the first camp of people think that you don't really need them because you should get all your micronutrients from your diet, but in reality they people generally don't. So, and especially when it comes to things like vitamin D, say, people who live in up north, they definitely don't
Yeah,
get
don't remind me.
sunlight.
Yeah.
So exactly. So it's probably a good idea to be supplementing calcium and vitamin D. And like I said, we talked about how often do you cook yourself a piece of salmon? If not, then it's probably a good idea to
Yeah.
take those fish oils.
Well, I think the key is like sufficient quantities because it's like okay,
Right.
calcium. Like even if you're drinking like a glass of milk a day, it still might not be enough. Like so,
Right. And even then, most people
don't.
don't drink a glass of milk
No, no,
a
no,
day.
no, no.
So yeah, it's just not really enough. And especially if we're talking like because we are talking like fitness, generally people who are concerned about the way they look. If you are dieting, you are definitely not getting all the
Okay, yeah.
micronutrients you need. So that's something to consider as well. So what else? What else do you want to know about? But what other supplements?
All right,
How
yeah. Let's
deep are
get
we going to
let's
get
get into
into
the fun ones.
this?
Let's talk steroids.
Steroids. Okay, yeah.
So all
I'm not
right, so let me give you my impression of steroids
sure.
before I hear your take on it because like I feel like in popular media like the what where steroids got big in the news was when those baseball players started getting busted for it.
Hmm.
And so like
So tell me what's required.
my impression of a steroid user is like Barry Bonds. You got this big funny head and like you just have this very distinctive like shape of a body. But also this was 10 plus years ago. So what
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about is like modern Roy. Like what's happening like what's like the new I guess tech would be the word, but like cuz I mean like in the 70s they were using like bear tranquilizers and like that was so clearly like things evolve.
Right. There's not only so in the early days, even with bodybuilding, like steroids or anabolic like hormones, things like exogenous testosterone. So it's like you take more testosterone, which is correlated with increased muscle growth. There's even a study that says like this group took testosterone and did not work out, made more muscle gains than the people who actually worked out but no steroids. Like taking steroids and not even training can make you gain more muscle than actual training.
See, so
So
and this is why I'm asking you about it cuz and this isn't a bad thing, but everyone's always looking for an easy fix or like an
right.
like how can or if your objective is to look good.
Mm-hmm,
So why
mm-hmm.
would you give a shit about like how much you can lift, right? You're just trying
Trying
to
to look
fit
good.
an
Right,
aesthetic.
right, right.
So why wouldn't
Right.
you take a steroid? But all right, sorry, I just wanted to interrupt, but continue.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, so
That's
that's
fast.
what
I didn't
like
know that. That's fascinating. With the
oh yeah,
somebody just sitting
it's a
there.
very interesting study. Do nothing, right? So in men, mind you, this is was a study
I'm
in
googling some steroids right now.
yeah,
That sounds
no.
awesome.
One so if your testosterone levels are good, and you can make them even higher, then you will grow more muscle, but it comes with a lot of negative effects. And don't get me wrong, like steroids are actually pretty commonly used. You go to any gym and you'll probably
Yeah,
find a few people who are using. It's actually regularly found on the market due to the fact that it is you have to be prescribed testosterone
but then you just sell that
because
shit.
they don't, but people do. Obviously there's always ways, but they don't, you can't just buy it in the store at a pharmacy. You have to be prescribed it, but people who do get prescribed it will then maybe sell it, or they get it somewhere, or they formulate it themselves. But there's also like what you were saying, like what's the new hot thing, like what's so the modern era has introduced things like peptides and growth hormone, and those that's when like the change, like the introduction of that has really brought on a lot of like
So that's like HGH, yeah.
yeah, HGH, and also IGF-1
Mm-hmm.
peptides, which will stimulate muscle growth through the IGF-1 pathway. And that is when like people went from looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger to people looking like Ronnie Coleman. Like it's like from like aesthetic bodybuilder to like freaks, like big ass guys, because of these things are manipulated. And like you were saying, it's like, why wouldn't you want, if you're just trying to gain muscle and you don't really care, like why wouldn't you take them? Well, so if you start taking testosterone and then you stop tomorrow, your body will no longer produce testosterone. So you will have to take it forever. So that's one caveat.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
So
that's
once you take steroids, there's no going back.
yeah, once you go to the dark side, when you switch over to the dark side, it's hard to go back. I know
I
it's
see.
possible to raise low T naturally without taking testosterone, but it's very difficult, and it's probably pretty hard. But it does return in some people after years, but it doesn't always. So so
And
people will have to take
there's
it.
no like drug you could take to, I mean, except more steroids.
Except testosterone, you
Yeah,
can
it's
you just
you're
keep
done.
taking it,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Right. And then so the other negative effects is that it's very bad for you. Like it can, most people who take excessive amounts of testosterone that it's not regulated by a physician, because they don't know what they're doing, probably like causes, there's a high risk of heart attack. So your heart is not really meant to pump so much muscle into, or so much blood to
I
more
see.
muscle than it can. So it's very common that you'll see that bodybuilders will die of heart attack because the heart
Oh.
simply isn't strong enough, and it can be affected. There's a lot of negative effects of testosterone, but there's also a lot of positive effects of taking low doses of like moderate doses
So
of
if you're
testosterone.
regulating it like
Yeah.
properly,
Yeah, especially if you, okay, so if you have low testosterone, this is why it's kind of
how do you
been introduced. If
how do you
you
know?
feel, a lot of people will get it tested. So like men, especially after like, like in their 40s and beyond, like who are older than like 40, and they're getting to that point where like they just feel tired, or
Yeah, well,
they
symptoms. Yeah.
low energy, things like that. I think the biggest one is low energy and low sex drive. And from there, which is not normal for a man,
Define like low sex drive
not wanting to have sex.
at all. Okay.
I don't know if it's at all, or if it's just like very rarely, or if you have no desire to even masturbate, like nothing
Okay.
is stimulated in that respect. Then some people will often, see a doctor and be like, all right, how's my testosterone level going? And if it's low, then there are a lot of positive effects to taking like moderate doses of testosterone to make it more to normal. But beyond normal is excessive. But to make yourself more normal, you might feel a little better, sleep a little better, feel, bring your sex drive back, bring things back up to normal.
So all
So
right, and you briefly mentioned this, but I just want to clarify this point. So some people have low testosterone, some people naturally have high testosterone. But
it
like
decreases with age.
it decreases with age. But is this
Hmm.
why like some people are just, or at least my impression is that some people are just more like they find it easier to build muscle
Oh,
versus
absolutely.
others? Okay.
You're also incredibly, like, you feel like when you're in the gym, from what I understand from people who have supplemented with this, you're a
They're shooting
lot
steroids up their
stronger.
butt. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're a lot stronger. So
A
also
lot
it makes you
stronger
feel
meaning
like
like,
Superman.
wait, what do you mean a lot stronger? So like given two people who look like they have the same physique, if one's on roids, they can lift. What does that mean?
So it's only compared to yourself. So say
Okay.
for instance you really struggled getting like 315 on a bench press, then like after you start using for a bit, you might be able to get that way faster than if you were to train naturally without it.
But that sounds like, I mean, you were just saying that like it gives you a little bit more energy. Isn't that the
And
source of it?
strength, like
Okay,
strength
okay.
power output is higher.
Okay.
So, but again, like you shouldn't resort to Steroids are illegal, so
Well, but
unless
no,
for some
if you're
reason.
prescribed by a doctor, then it's not.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
yep. And I like again, like I personally don't like discriminate against anybody who uses it. It's actually frequently used as long as you're open about using. That's my biggest gripe with, say like even people on social media. There'll be guys who will use and then they teach younger people that, that
I'm all
they're
natural
sending
or
like
whatever.
yeah, and they might be sending like the wrong message. And like they claim that this is what they've achieved naturally, and it can be discouraging when you do try all these things naturally and you're just not getting those results.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So all right, I'm gonna go get a
You're
prescription
you're,
for. Yeah,
you're just googling how
Yeah,
do I
You're gonna see me. I'm
steroids.
gonna look good as hell next time you see. I'm only kind of kidding. Um. Okay. So is there? And so, all right. So men are the effects more worse in females?
That's interesting. So steroids are taken by women. Not only do they take exogenous testosterone, which it does help improve not in, it just helps you grow muscle if you're trying to as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But women also have high levels of estrogen, so what they need
Right.
to do to increase their testosterone is to block estrogen, so they'll take anti-estrogens
Okay.
and like aromatase inhibitors and things like that. But there are a lot of very negative effects, especially in women. It will disrupt their normal menstrual cycle. They
Yeah.
probably will lose it. And they will probably start to grow facial hair. They will probably have a deepening of their voice. And they will also probably they will grow more muscle for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of negative consequences in women. All of the negatives that men experience, as well as all the
A
things that
couple
maybe
extra
men
fun bonuses. Man,
exactly.
y'all always getting a raw deal.
Yeah, I know. We get the short end of the stick, but that is just women definitely like unless you're trying to be a bodybuilder, which is impossible without taking exogenous steroids. As a female, you're just not gonna be like. I think that women have the opposite problem. They would, unless they want to be, like I said, a bodybuilder. Like women don't want to be too bulky or too muscular, so they probably want to
Mm.
not have too much testosterone.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so uh, are there natural ways that don't have these effects that maybe aren't as big as taking a steroid, but that can do similar things to drive up testosterone levels?
I know that there are some things that you can eat, like dietary wise, that can improve testosterone. Um,
It's not
I,
doesn't sound common though.
well, I think it's just like zinc. There's a lot of like test boosters, but I don't know how effective they
Yeah.
are. They're like over like even in just like pill form, horny goat weed, things like that. Like I don't
Wait,
know.
what?
Yeah, there's like a supplement that's called horny goat weed. I think it's just like it's a plant, and that's just the name of the plant. And the irony of that, I don't know
Huh.
where its name came from,
Yeah.
but that is one. Um, so there are some supplements that out there that can improve testosterone, but I don't know how. Like it's nowhere near as effective as just exogenous straight testosterone. So
Sure.
but like I like if you were to do like research or talk to a physician, there might be something out there. But are you worried about low T, Krishna?
No, I'm
Is
just
that
curious. I might
yeah.
be. No. What was I gonna ask? Oh yeah.
It's
So
not a bad idea though to get your levels checked if you are like having like bad side effects of some things, like you feel like you have it. Like it's not a bad idea to go see a doctor
okay.
though.
So then now there's just curiosity. So so like where are steroids banned in your world? So like bodybuilding competitions or like weightlifting, like
Mm.
where is there a lot of testing happening?
Okay,
Because you
so
hear about these bodybuilders that are roiding up, and then
oh, for sure, for sure. To compete in the league that's called the IFBB, which is like the federation that is for professional physique athletes, that steroids are completely fair game.
Okay.
So they're not they're more or less just not tested, and it's more or less implied to get there that you
I was
have
about
to
to
be.
say, so
Yeah,
it sounds
yeah,
exactly like Barry Bonds. It's like
yeah.
he
Well,
put
it's actually you're not allowed to in baseball.
no, my point is that like basically he was killing everybody, and then everybody started taking steroids, and then he
Hmm.
got left behind, and he's like, well, here's me on steroids, and then he just started hitting all these.
Hitting home runs.
Yeah, but it's like he couldn't keep up, even though he was like probably the best athlete in baseball of all time pre
Hmm.
steroids. It's like he couldn't keep up when people started.
Started using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it the same way in like in these physique competitions? Just most, if not all, are probably doing it.
Oh, for sure. Even at like the lower levels of like in the professional world, say with men, they're the smallest category. They're even using some sort of
But even like, wouldn't that quote unquote smallest category just be it's like a frame thing more than it is like a
yeah, bodybuilding is all about illusions and aesthetics, but you have to have a certain level of muscle mass to compete at that level.
yeah.
But as an amateur, you can still be all amateurs will still use in the NPC, which is the partnered with the IFBB. However, there are natural federations that
Okay.
kind of more or less level out this playing field.
But that's like
And
watching minor league baseball. It's like
yeah,
sort of unsatisfying.
it's not popular. That's probably why you may have never heard of it. You've probably seen like or heard of like mainstream bodybuilding on at least at one time in your life.
Yeah, like the
But
Mr.
in terms
Olympia,
of
right? That,
yeah, Mr. Olympia or the Arnold or things like that, but you've probably never heard of like the top competitors in the natural world. And it's just because it just doesn't have
no
a
one
very
gives a
big
shit. Yeah.
following. Yeah, and you know what you achieve naturally is just maybe not as impressive to the people who are used to looking at, you know, Phil Heath, who has won, you know, the Olympia many times in a row now.
Uh huh.
Um so those are where actually you're actually polygraph tested in natural federation, so they see if you're lying, and you can't have used anything. I think it's 7 years in the last 7 years, and I from what I imagine, I know polygraph is
I was
not the
about to say,
most stringent. It's not
isn't
the
that
most
not a
stringent, but if you are, it's I think it's enough of a deterrent that if you are using, why not compete in a federation that is untested? So I
I
think
just remembered. You remember the movie Juana Man?
no.
You don't remember Juana Man? So Juana Man was he was like a NBA player, and I guess he was like a fringe NBA player. And he's like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna go compete in the WNBA." So he got like a wig, some like
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I guess that's in a way you'd be more competitive if you are
yeah, and he
using.
was just dunking on everybody in WNBA. But it's
That
like,
is true. That is true, but there's not as there's like if you want to do that, then I mean, and pass the polygraph test and jump through all these hoops to do it, then yeah, sure, like you might do that and get away with it. But I don't think it's very common. I think they have caught people, but I don't know how common it is. And then in terms of like power related sports or strength related sports, there's powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting that is untested. So a lot of people do take steroids. And then there's, like I said, the same thing. Like there's federations where you are tested, and I think in like strength related sports, you do have to do a urine test.
okay,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, and now that the Olympics are on, it's kind of relevant. Like you're not supposed to be on. There's a big Russian drug bust.
Man, these Russians always getting busted for
I
drugs,
know
man.
the Russians
You
always get
figure
in
they'd
trouble. They get caught, but a lot of people like Olympic athletes, that pressure of winning, like they'll do it, and sometimes they get caught. But you're not supposed to. There, from
yeah.
what I understand, you're not allowed to be using PEDs or performance enhancing drugs.
The one that got me. This was a couple Olympics ago, but it was a dude. He was a shooter, like he like one of the gun sports, and he
And
got
he was
busted for a PD because
that's
he was taking
so
something to
fun.
calm his nerves, I guess.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's hilarious.
That's actually what made me think about steroids is that like okay, we always think about the dudes like Barry Bonds, but like all these like bicyclists were roiding up, but they're like
Oh,
these
they
furry
were
little
blood
fellas.
doping. I think they were blood
Okay, yeah.
doping.
What's the difference there then?
I think that it increases the amount of oxygen in your
Oh, that
body,
makes
so it
sense. Okay, they weren't
decreases.
taking HGH then.
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
that
I
does.
don't
Yeah,
think
okay,
so.
that didn't make sense then. Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I think they were blood doping. And I think that's why they revoked the 7 Tour de France's at Lance Armstrong one. I
Yeah.
think he was blood doping. So yeah, but other than steroids, what other
Oh,
supplements?
let's talk about the weight loss pills.
Okay. This is actually this is like a good arena to talk on because there are very, very few supplements out there that actually make you lose weight. And there are thousands, if not millions, of products on the shelves that claim to do so. So it is like basically just throwing away money if you're gonna like buy some sort of fat burner or thing like that. Um, in terms of what it is, because the only things to my knowledge that have been effective at actual fat burning or increasing your internal temperature, which they call like they like a thermogenic, which would maybe make you burn an extra, 50 to 100 calories a day, is caffeine, which you can get from a caffeine tablet or just coffee.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to buy like an actual fat burner. And ephedrine, which is not even on the market anymore. So if you're gonna buy like a pre-packaged proprietary blend fat burner, you might as well just go ahead and just have coffee a couple
Wait, so
times a day.
why is ephedrine not on the market anymore?
So a lot of people were abusing it. And if there was a
Fucking up
few
for everybody else.
yeah, there was a few instances of people having heart attacks because they were just taking way too much of it. So they pulled it off the market.
I bet you could still get that shit somewhere.
Yeah, I think that like you
Get it from like
probably,
China or something.
yeah, you probably can, but it is something that has been shown to be extremely effective. Like all of these things that they say, like that are in all these like fat burner tablets and stuff like that, there's very little evidence to support like the research behind it, but there are a few things that have been well studied, things like caffeine, and ephedrine that have been shown to really markedly reduce like the amount of fat mass in a, like, or they'll lose more weight
Mm.
generally
So
speaking.
wait, what's the logic behind caffeine then? Like, is it
So it increases like your heart rate and it increases your RMR just a little bit. Um,
RMR? Help me out here.
yep. So your resting metabolic rate. So
That was gonna
how
be my second
much
guess.
yeah, so while you're like alive and kicking, just like sitting here awake,
Yeah.
how many calories does it take to run your or fuel your body is your RMR?
Okay.
And if you can raise that a little bit, even just by 50 to 100 calories, I think over a month time, if you raise it like 100 calories a day, that's a substantial amount of calories. But it's pretty minor. You can obviously offset that by like avoiding that last bite of cake. Like I said, fat loss is mostly dietary.
Yeah,
But
but how good is that cake though?
yeah, exactly. If you want to live
I'm a
a
weak
little,
man, Stephanie. You know that.
I know. I don't know if you guys have seen me, but I have. If you guys go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that I can
It's
put down some food.
insane. No,
You,
but also I've sat next to you and I just because like on a video it's like okay I see you eating all this much but there's always that like suspension of disbelief
yep,
where
yep.
it's like okay maybe
True.
yeah
You
but
have to see it to believe it.
I've seen it and I still don't believe it. It's insane how much you put
Yeah,
down.
I know. I've thought to myself, I'm like, I don't know why I do fitness. It's like, man, I should just be a competitive eater. It's always like a little tiny Asian girl that's like winning these.
I ever tell you in college I partied with Kobayashi before.
Really?
Yeah.
What what was that like?
It was wild cuz all right so he was so
Skinny and like
he's ripped.
yep.
Like he is in incredible shape. He's an athlete.
Yeah.
Like don't
Yeah.
people get that twisted. That guy's an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But he was I guess it was some my buddy was playing like a concert for like some Asian organization and he was like their keynote speaker.
That's
And
hilarious.
like my keynote is like he just ate a pizza.
Oh, that's funny. In like 30 seconds.
Yeah, so like just doing what he does, you know. And then so we got a picture with him and then we're like, "Hey, we're going to this house party. You want to come along?" He's like, "Sure." And we're like, huh?
That's so funny.
So it's me and my buddy in the front two seats. I'm driving. Me and my buddy in the front two seats, and then him, his translator, and his agent in the back. In my Explorer, and I was like, and the whole time I'm like, I better not crash this motherfucker, because I'm.
This guy is valuable.
This is how you make the news. But yeah, it was a great night, and he could drink like a damn fish if you could believe that.
Yeah, his capacity.
Yeah.
That actually takes training, capacity
Oh,
training.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So for like that just blew my mind. I was like, I could just eat, and I guess I've been training for this my whole life. I don't know.
Yeah, they do like weird things, like they strategically expand their stomach like a muscle, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
how? Yeah.
Yeah. And they train it by like eating lots of food to expand their stomach, but they do it on like
They also
just
use
like
water,
on a regular,
right?
I think some of them use cabbage, like they'll cook cabbage, which is very
Okay.
low, very, very low calorie, but obviously you can eat a ton of it, and
I
it
see.
like,
So it's like it's about getting that volume expansion then.
yeah, and it grows, like you can obviously like anything over time, it can continue to stretch, and you can get better. I'm sure that everyone not listening wants to be a competitive eater, needs to learn these tactics.
Man.
But no, like the more that you do it, I think the more that they can.
The dude
can
is
eat.
shredded though, man. He's like, yeah, it's incredible.
I feel like, yeah, it's obviously has to do with like offsetting, so the way that they train. But
and actually we were talking with him, and we were like, what do you want your next part of your career to be? And he's like, I want to be a nutritionist.
Interesting.
And it's like, who better?
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because he's like, I can teach you how to eat whatever you want and still stay shredded. Sounds like a commercial.
Yeah. All right, now all right, finally, all right, so all right, I forgot to follow up on this, but with the caffeine, so like, so is it like your normal coffee intake, like 2 cups a day? I guess I don't know if that's normal, but that's what I'm drinking nowadays.
I think they've studied 600 milligrams a day will increase your.
So a normal cup of coffee is how many milligrams?
200, so like 3 cups, up
a day.
to. Yeah,
and that's where that's the prime. That's like that's where you should be at if you're trying to lose weight.
That can be helpful if it's too much. Obviously, like it's so minimal. Like if you like can't go to sleep,
obviously
that's not good.
Yeah.
Because sleep, actually, the more sleep you get is correlated with like more fat loss. So sleep would be king. But caffeine, if you have the ability to take that much, that is shown to show the most without too many harmful effects, other than like if it keeps you up.
Okay. All right, then finally the less splashy one, so like the creatine and the protein supplements. So what's your take on that?
Sure. So in terms of protein, you don't need to have any kind of whey powder. If you don't want to buy it, it can be expensive. However, if protein powder makes getting in your total daily intake of protein easier, like you are busy, you're always on the go, you need to at least try to hit that 1 gram per pound amount, whether you do that with all whole foods.
And
because
this is if you're trying to gain muscle, or
muscle,
just to maintain.
And if you are dieting, not to lose muscle.
Okay.
So you want to prevent breakdown too. So when you're dieting, you're more prone to losing muscle, and you don't want that to happen either. Even if you're not like trying to get the biggest of all time, it's probably not good for your body in terms of like sarcopenia, like in strength and like daily activities, bringing your groceries in. Like you don't want to lose too much muscle by like, kind of like withering away if you diet way too hard. So good ways of preventing that are weight training and having sufficient protein. So try to hit your total daily protein intake is key. And however you find it easiest to do that, whether that be with supplementation of protein powder or eating just whole foods, just try to hit that number. So I personally find it easier to hit that number with protein powder. It also helps me because it tastes good, like curbs like a sweet tooth, and it's filling, so it helps.
Yeah, they really figured that shit out, because them shakes are delicious.
I know, yeah, it's like a milkshake. So do you drink protein?
When I was actually in the gym, I was yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, so there's like 2 different kinds. There's whey protein isolate, and then there's like a protein isolate, and then there's also casein, which they just digest at different rates, so they can have different utility. But for like the general population, that's not super important. That's like
for the general population, whey is probably fine.
That's fine. And just hitting that total protein intake. So like a one scoop is usually like 25 to 30 grams. So that can really help if you're like, if you basically like work in a lab, say, and or work all day and barely get to eat, then it can help you catch up on that. Or a good way to like have something fast midday, and then make sure you're hitting that protein. So creatine, aside from caffeine, creatine I think is actually the most well-studied supplement on the
Yeah.
market. And it has a lot of positive effects in terms of gaining more muscle because
Okay.
so the way that it does that, it doesn't actively stimulate like testosterone would muscle growth. But what creatine does do when you load it properly is that it makes you much stronger, it increases your power output. So more weight you're moving in the gym equals more muscle growth.
Okay.
So that's how it kind of helps you grow more muscle. It doesn't directly do it. If you sat on your butt and drank it, it won't do anything. And creatine is actually found
That's
in
what the
a lot of,
steroids are for.
yeah, exactly. That's how you really do it. Krishna's still Googling steroids.
Yeah. No. No.
Um,
I've already ordered them shits. Yeah.
but yeah, creatine is it's nothing to be afraid of. It can actually make you hold on a little bit to water, so your muscles will look a little bit fuller. But it's found in foods that we eat as well. It's like it's found in steak and
Sure.
eggs and things like that. But you can supplement it if you're not getting enough of it, and it's really cheap. And there's no harm in it. There's no negative effects of taking it. So a lot of people just recommend to take it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other supplements that I didn't mention that you think it's worth mentioning?
Hmm. I'm trying to think. I think we covered like big ones. We can if you want to like talk about like things that would be say like in a pre-workout that can really help you, but those are for people who are really trying to optimize their training. It's not at all necessary to take it, but things like L-citrulline also help power output in the gym. It decreases muscle soreness, it increase or decreases muscle fatigue, things like that. It's shown very in small, like not like significant amounts, but can be helpful. And I think beta alanine is very been shown to have very good effects for people who do endurance sports. But again, these are no supplements are necessary. It's just if
I
you
see.
want something to make,
This is
they're
all to
supposed to
optimize. This is all to polish it.
yes, this is just a supplement what you are already doing. But this is just if you want that last 5%, then that's where supplements come in.
All right. Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
Hmm.
Any other things about any? All right. So let's tie it all together now.
Hmm.
Um. So about diet,
Hmm.
it's all right. Let's see if I learned anything today.
Okay, let's see.
It's all about balance. It's all about getting all your macros. I'm talking like one of y'all now.
Oh yeah, I'm
So
impressed.
your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fats.
Hmm.
Don't do dumb shit. So like
Yeah.
if it looks like it's gonna be terrible for you, it probably is. So don't eat that fried. Uh,
Don't eat lots of it, but
Lots of it. Yeah. No.
don't
Obviously. Yeah.
restrict yourself.
That's the thing is that like you shouldn't feel like you're completely eliminating
Exactly.
anything, but
Hmm.
also don't shovel shit in your mouth. And then yeah, I think that's basically it.
Don't shovel shit in your mouth. That is a
I'm
summary of
I'm a
diet right
yeah.
there.
It didn't seem that hard. Yeah.
It's really not. People really overcomplicate it. So to be honest with you, that is a good way of putting it because it really is that simple.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna come back and talk about exercise and how to
Mhm.
go to the gym.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for part one of my conversation with Dr. Stephanie Buttermore. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I know I did. Stay tuned in exactly 2 weeks for part two, where we talk about exercise. So 2 weeks, that'll be on April 11th. As always, don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave a review. Tell us that you like us. I need it. And don't forget to follow Stephanie. Subscribe to her great YouTube channel. And follow her on Instagram, at Stephanie_Buttermore, if you want to learn more about what she does, more about the fitness world, more about the science of fitness, and most importantly, about butts. All right. See you in 2 weeks.